this is probably a better answer to this question. There hasn't really needed to be a lot of standard setting, to be completely honest. I don't know if it's that I have a good sense of a person kind of at the beginning of meeting them, but every single person that I've hired in Podigy has been phenomenal, like beyond phenomenal. The connections that I've made, the people that are involved are fantastic. They do their own standard setting. They just do good work.
Hey, welcome to Building Bigfoot, the podcast where we talk about building your business profitably. If you raise a ton of money and you're venture capital based and you grow big, you're a unicorn. But if you are a regular business and you're an entrepreneur and you have a dream and you go out there and you are self-funded and you have success, well, you got to be something else. You're a Bigfoot. So this podcast is for all of the Bigfoots out there. And I am excited to interview Justin. So Justin Moore is... amazingly talented. I would put you in the category of what, like musician, creative,
Sure, musician,
audio engineer, all of the above. Which you'll get into in a second. And he's the genius that is behind the scenes on all of this podcast. So when you think, oh, this guy sounds okay, or this podcast seems like it's edited well, it's not me. It's 100% Justin. So I'm really excited because this is a great topic. So we're going to talk about Justin's life, a little bit how he got into this, but also podcasting and maybe how you could invest in podcasting in your business, because it is such a fast growing opportunity for a lot of people today. So Justin works with everybody. He works with people who are real estate agents, like the Stone Sisters, who are building a thriving business, and he works with just a wide spectrum of professionals and business leaders in the space. So, Justin, why don't you share a little bit about your backstory and maybe even so we met through a mutual friend, Aiden.
Yep.
So why don't you share a little bit of backstory, how you got into music, and maybe a little bit about kind of what started happening in Europe with your recordings, which is really cool.
Yeah. So, thanks for having me. It's weird being on the other side of this, but it's cool. So when I was very young, I was introduced to a lot of music because my parents are opera singers. So both my parents are very, very high caliber opera singers because they graduated, both of them, from Juilliard in Manhattan. And my dad went on to tour around Europe singing opera, and so around my house was very musical all the time. There was lots of classical stuff. My dad really liked rock music as well. My mom did a lot of Broadway music, so there was a huge there was a huge sphere of types of music, genres of music, and I think when I was really young, that just sort of got ingrained in me in a lot of different ways, and just being surrounded by that all the time, I guess I just developed some type of singing voice from probably just mimicking my parents and all the people that they would teach. They taught a lot of singing when I was young, and there was just like hundreds of people coming in and out of my house, like taking lessons, and constantly hearing my dad like, "Oh, you should, use the air like this." And I think, like, even though you're really young and you don't actually know exactly what that kind of stuff means, it's like it's sort of building a like a it's building the scaffolding to how you're imagining these concepts of singing and music. And so I listened to my parents all the time. I listened to them sing, come around with rehearsals with them all the time, went to all their shows. They did tons of shows. um and this is just like flooding into my brain like all the time, right? Like it's just so synonymous with who I am. And so my parents, my mom still teaches, but my dad actually stopped singing and he went and started a business, like a trades business, because the other side of my family is they're pump installers, so like water well, like deep well pump installations to pump water up to like rural homes that don't have access to like commercial water supplies. And so my dad just like loves this. Like he loves it as much or more than he loves singing, which was really weird when he made that switch about 7 or 8 years ago, because I got to see how passionate he was about something like just running a basic business. Whereas before, my whole life had been very like focused on only the creative aspects, and like the world of opera is just highly creative. So I got a really good, like, well-rounded picture of what things could be like for my parents, because my dad was just very good in business, and my mom as well, like really really my mom as well, but also just the hyper creative side of life. And so I think that really plays into like what I'm doing now, because I I'm running the podcast company, which is sort of like a pseudo marketing media company, because the podcast production side of things is obviously a big part of it, like producing the audio and all that stuff. But the other side of it is that you're running a business where the platform is just communicating with people, right? Like that's essentially what it is. Like when you break it down, it's just like the podcast is being listened to by humans, and so there's like a lot of marketing that you have to think about. And so I think, and then the other side of my life is my music that I write, and I write a lot of songs. I went on a really long journey of a lot of different paths with music. Never thought I would really, I never really thought I would take it to the highest level, because I never wanted to reach any kind, like I never really wanted to achieve any kind of fame from music. I really didn't want to. I didn't want to like have a life of constant moving around and traveling and zero stability. So I decided that I was gonna probably not do that. And so I didn't really know that there was a way to make money from music unless you were touring. Everybody said that. Like um, when I started kind of going viral on social media, because that happened as well. I got approached by a couple labels who would talk to me, and I tell them I'm never going to tour. By the way, like you're never going to get me to go on tour. Which maybe, like, I don't know, maybe I'm missing out on something, and maybe that's even possibly a small mistake. But I don't think I care. Like I think I know from what happened to my dad when he was touring, I just don't want to do it. So I got like immediately turned down by like so many people because I didn't want to tour. They're like, well, how are you ever going to make money? Um, so I mean, that was kind of the end of it. And then I started writing some dance music in Europe. Actually met my fiance because I wrote a song with this dude in Europe who she knew, and then she heard it, and then she traveled to Canada and we met. So dance music actually led me to my fiance now, but it also it opened up a huge opportunity for me, because there's very few singers in the dance music industry. And I got approached by a few people to write some songs for them, paid very well. And then I realized that it could pay very, very well, especially the quicker you are, because every song that you write, you can sell for a high fee. I'm talking like lowest €1,000, but more like, between 1,000 to 3,000 euros per song. And then you also get cut into the royalties, so you're making passive income like every time that it gets streamed. So I realized that like just writing a lot of songs and selling them off to the like hundreds of thousands of DJs, mostly in Europe, is like a really profitable way to do music and to also like still write and do what you love. And so I started doing that. So I've written like 200 songs in the last probably 6 months. I've sold like
Wow, that's wild.
75 to 100 songs. I was writing 3 a day for months. And I haven't released a ton of them yet because it takes a long time from somebody purchasing to actually releasing these songs. Um,
And
but
why
I'm
is
getting
that?
like a
Why
million,
does it take a long time?
because they have to actually produce it. I send them an acapella, so I've got like just the bass vocal, some harmonies, some backing tracks, maybe some ad libs and stuff, and then they have to build a whole song around it. And sometimes if they're really inspired, they'll do it within like a month. But if they're not, and they're maybe backed up with a lot of stuff, then it can take like up to a year before the song actually comes out. But they pay me up front, which is great. It's like, well, I don't really care when they release it, as long as they eventually do. But I'm getting around 1 million streams a month on my like 20 songs that are out right now. But that sounds like a lot, but it doesn't feel like a lot, because my goal this year was to reach 50 million streams, and I might still achieve it. But now that Podigy has taken a bit of a different route, I've been spending way less time writing songs and way more time on the podcast production side of stuff. So there's like there's a ton of different like roads that I've went down. That's why it's really hard to describe like where I am now, because there was like Fiverr, which I started music on, which I made my living from for like 3 years while I was going through business school. Then I dropped out of business school to pursue like writing my own songs, and then I did dance music, and then I started Podigy, and then I blew up on social media, and I was making like most of my money from my social media posts on like TikTok and stuff. Was getting like millions and millions and millions of views, like probably like 10 to 15 million views a month, like just tons and tons of views on my videos. And then back to Podigy, then back to writing songs. So it's kind of like lots of different streams of stuff. But um, yeah, it's just complicated to try and like explain how I got to this exact spot. But feel good where I am now.
Yeah, it's super cool. So you obviously have always been interested in music. I mean, coming from your family, your parents
Absolutely.
being both very talented musicians, and growing up in that. It's my girls, my six and four. Music is something I think every kid loves. Like it's
Yes.
it's deep inside the soul. You just love it. Not everybody has the talent for it, but I think everybody loves it.
Yeah.
Uh, and what's interesting about your story is obviously this is like a big passion of yours, and you've been kind of navigating life without having necessarily like the need for clarity of what the outcome's going to look like, but just
Yeah.
accepting the opportunities as they come your way, but knowing for sure, some of the things that you don't want it to look like. And
Yeah.
usually, um, fast forward like 10 or 20 years, that ends up crafting new paths for other people, because then they say, oh, that's possible. I didn't know that was possible. Um,
Yeah.
and I think that's really neat. Uh, you can think of a lot of people who've succeeded in business through sport, or they succeeded in business through other means, but at the time, everybody thought that was a terrible approach because it
Yes.
just seemed so counterintuitive. Or even the dropouts, like Zuckerberg dropped out of college,
Yep.
all these dropouts, and yet it looking back, you think, oh, every move they made was right.
Yep.
And it's not necessarily that every move they made was right, but their compass was right, which is,
Yeah, they had some type of guiding
yeah,
feeling
their
or
decision
yeah.
making framework was right. So they made
Yeah.
decisions that were in alignment with the things that they love to do, and they were creating a life that ultimately they liked. And I think that's such a neat part of your story. So you go to Europe, and your music really, like you said, has taken off. It's really taken
Yeah.
off there. And
Yeah, totally.
um and that's pretty cool. Like, is that, when you go somewhere and you can hear your, like, a song that you've written getting played, that's got to feel kind of neat, right?
It's super weird. Like I think when I first started the dance stuff, I had one guy play like the first dance song that I ever wrote, actually the one that connected me with my fiance. He played it in just like a club in Italy. Um and he sent me a video of as he was playing it, and there was like probably like 400 or 500 people like jumping to the song, and that's like my voice singing, which is really cool. And then and then honestly, like I got pretty deep into the dance industry, and I'm connected with a lot of other singers that are doing what I do. And you see them like posting stuff of DJs headlining like the biggest events in the world, like hundreds of thousands of people in the audience. And so I think like it really diluted how cool it was that like people were playing my songs in like clubs and stuff. But people like there's been a couple guys who have played tracks of mine for probably like 5 or 6 thousand people at like um at events, and they're like pretty famous DJs like around certain parts of Europe. Um so I think I think this is like with anything, but from the outside, yes, it's incredibly cool. But I'm very goal oriented. Whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, it's sometimes up for debate. But I just kind of see it as like, oh, like yes, it's cool, but I still want to like I want to get to that next spot. I want to get to where the other singers are getting, where the guys are playing it at the biggest events in the world. Um, but yeah, if you go on my Instagram, I have like a spot where it's just like stories of DJs playing these tracks and people singing along to the the songs, and like the DJ singing along with my voice on stage, and everyone just like it's really cool. And then when the drop comes, I just love how like the lights go up and the smoke and everything, and it's just like it's so weird because it's like I'm there, like it's me performing, but it's not like it has nothing to do with me at the same time. So very strange feeling, very well, I guess the feeling that every songwriter gets when their song gets played in a big setting or when it's on the radio or blows up or something like that.
Yes. It's so fascinating to me because you like that's yeah, those are big numbers. I mean, million plays, getting in front of these massive audiences, 6,000 people, 500 people.
Totally.
These are big events, and it's really really cool. There's this. It's both. I get what you're saying. Like it's both motivating because you're looking and you're like, oh, there's another level. There's like I can go, this can get taken further. And then
Yeah.
it's also can be like a little bit humbling because you're like, okay, but they're like, look at that level, and
Yeah.
look at where I am. And I think somehow uh there's this like knack of being able to see things like and say, okay, there's another level. And then
Hmm.
but at the same time, don't let that diminish the
Exactly.
impressiveness of the success that you've already achieved because there's this maybe you've heard of it. There's this bias that exists for people who are at the top of their game,
Hmm.
and they tend to underestimate the level that they're at. So
Of
um,
course,
yeah,
always.
and you'll see this for like the
Yeah.
world's best programmers. This is very very common. Like the world's
Hmm.
best programmers, they think in their mind that what they can do is just normal. Anybody can do it. It's not impressive. But if
Hmm.
you look at the scale of the world's best programmers versus like the world's, like average engineers,
Hmm.
the world's best ones are 10x, not just on productivity, but the way they solve problems, the way they it's amazing the difference it makes. And then that's just against the average. And then you also have the world's worst developers. It's like
Of
you,
course, yeah.
you,
My thought on that like is this. It's something that I think about all the time. And actually, it's good having my fiance, like having somebody so close to me in my life now, watching what I'm doing and um, literally listening to me record my songs all day, like right outside my studio. Because obviously, like I have a studio in one of our bedrooms. And to be reminded that like to have that other person remind you, okay, like it's still freaking awesome what's happening right now. Like even though, but I do think that I'm a very extreme person. Like I live in a way where, like I when I go, I go, and when I don't, it's hard for me to do anything. And so I think that the people that do succeed on like the highest levels, um, I always wonder like if it's if they would have ever gotten there had they not had that mindset of not being able to slow down and appreciate the the small wins, because it's just a constant hunger for the vision, like in the you know in the future. um so I do know that it's probably better for me to sometimes just appreciate what's happening, but also that's just not necessarily like my personality type, and I definitely would not be anywhere near where I am now if I was sitting around appreciating, because I have a very deep hunger for like the next step, um, which yeah, like I fully admit there's positives and negatives to that, and I don't know which outweighs which. I've heard lots of people say that you should take life slow and simply and don't worry about things, and then I've heard other people be like, set your goals and achieve them through whatever means necessary when you're young, and work as many hours as you can when you're young and build and so I don't know, I'm just doing what comes naturally at this point, because I kind of fed up with the advice industry in a lot of ways. But I do still follow a handful of people who I really admire and respect, and I take their advice, but I do see things like on Instagram all the time, like, oh, slow down, and then like, oh, keep, like work 24 hours, 7 days a week. Like, you know what I mean?
There's a lot of wisdom to that, because there there's a lot of people who are sharing advice not from a place of having success in it, but actually a place of having a sense of regret. And so then they look
Yeah,
at
that's a
that,
big point.
yeah, and then they look at that regret and they think, okay, what was the opposite of what I did, and I'm going to share that as advice, but not
And you think that that's
knowing,
a good? Oh yeah, sorry,
yeah,
you were
but
gonna
not
say it.
knowing that they were
Yeah,
actually on the right track,
yeah, they
and
just stopped.
they just stopped, and it was
Yeah,
really their mindset that is the problem. It's nothing to do with how they were doing it. It's just the way that they were feeling, they were carrying. And there's a difference as well. Like, I'm thinking about, so you've spent a lot of time in Italy. I love Italy. I've spent a little bit of time there. There's
yep,
a huge difference between hunger, whether it's the artistic creative type of hunger or the desire for the pursuit of the next thing, and actually just like enjoying the taste of what's in front of you in the moment. So
that's a big difference.
there's a
Yeah,
huge
between,
difference, right?
yeah,
And
yeah,
and it's and you know because you're sitting down and saying, wow, this is like a really delicious food or whatever it is,
yeah,
that's not the same as being, I'm going to stay full for a long time, or I'm not even full.
hmm,
Maybe I'm just enjoying the journey. And
yeah,
for myself, that's something I have to get really intentional with, because I'm wired a little bit more like you are, where
yes. Well, we run businesses, right? Like
yeah,
that's I
and
feel like that's something that happens to people who run businesses, or that's how they got to that spot. It has to be, you don't just fall into a successful business. It's like pain,
it,
like,
it
and thinking and love. But there's also, you gotta be so passionate about it to do all the learning. You got to become an expert, and then you got to build the whole thing around the expertise. And it's like yeah,
well, it can be dangerous too, because you can fall into the future state. So,
absolutely,
where you're like, okay, I will stop and savor this meal when I've reached whatever arbitrary like point in time or success that I've set as myself. And that
yeah,
bar never goes away, because what
yeah,
happens is time moves on. And what I thought was an impressive mountain to climb when I was a kid, or when I was in my 20s, or when I first started, like, you know what I mean? Becomes not so impressive when I'm actually there, because
when you're in it, yeah.
I didn't even subconsciously notice that the mountain was built, like, was increasing in my mind. And
Yeah, because as you're building up to the goal, you're becoming more successful, and by the time you reach it, you've changed the whole
yeah,
structure.
you see the next mountain range, and so now your
Yeah,
mind is focusing on that. And so I was talking to this guy this last week, and it was mind boggling, because he's talking to me about travel, and he's saying how and he's in his 60s, and he was just talking about going out of Europe, and or out of North America, and he said, "Oh, I've never actually traveled. I've never traveled." And I thought, "Oh, that's crazy." And he's like, "But I will once I've retired, and I've got a date of
mhm,
when I'm going to retire." And I was like, "Oh, that's such a dangerous place to be," because when a person retires, their world doesn't change. Like, their mindset is the same as it was before they retired. Maybe the
mhm,
way they viewed money is the same as the way their habits are the same, their behaviors they're the same person, they're just
yeah,
retired. And so there's two things there. And then the second part of it is just like, well, who's to say you will live that long? Like,
yeah,
no,
or be
so
healthy by the time you retire,
yeah,
or
so we gotta choose to do the things, um while we are you know in the year as it is. So, for example, like, in the case of this guy, I know him. I've known him for a bunch of years. I just never knew they hadn't traveled. And
right,
he's he he could just basically go and yeah, it would be a sacrifice. Maybe it would extend his retirement a month, but he can go and take that trip for a month.
yeah,
And
of course,
but I think for him, the fear is probably what's holding him back. It's like the fear of the
mhm,
unknown, or maybe it's like it's a big thing in his mind. So start with a really
yeah,
small trip. Go for like a 2-day trip somewhere local, and then make it a
Mhm.
3-day trip somewhere a little further, and then a 4-day trip somewhere else. And then all of a sudden you're doing a week trip in another country, and then a 2-week trip, and then a 3-week trip. Like
Yeah.
you discover it's number one, it's not so scary, it's not so hard, and it's not as expensive as you think it might be. And before now you've got like a whole repertoire of really cool experiences to look back on and say, I did it, and I did it when I could. Because
Well, it's sure convenient to have a like a reasonable excuse to not do something like traveling. Like it makes sense, right? Like it logically, okay, we'll wait till I retire, and then I'm gonna be less busy and I'll have more money. And but it's really, yeah, like you wonder. Um, I even just think about myself. Like you can come up with these logical excuses that make perfect sense, but there's still there's still excuses. And if you are afraid of traveling the way that I was afraid of traveling before I went to Italy, um, yeah, I mean, you might never get to the you might never get there. Like what happens when the retirement comes and then there's the next excuse? Well, my knee, I got a knee surgery. I'll go after that, or then that. So I know exactly what you're saying. It's a good point.
yeah, no, and so now you're doing, so you're obviously got Podigy. Podigy is a great name because it sounds very much like Prodigy. And
Except yes, but honestly, there's come a problem with it, which is that, so when I came up with that name, with my mom, actually, my mom is a genius when it comes to stuff like that, like words. She's a really good writer. So I would text my mom like, "Hey, I need some names. I'm gonna try and start this podcasting company, and I really need some names for like a play on words with podcasting." And so she came up with Podigy, and I was like, "That's awesome!" And made the whole company, everything. Like 6 months later, I went and did like a Google search, and sure enough, there's like a pretty prominent Podigy within the podcasting industry already. And they're from Toronto, so they're also Canadian. So that's not like a way that you can distinguish the two. Um, so I mean, it won't be a huge problem, I don't think, for us, because we work with like a small amount of clients, so we don't need like a lot of like market share or anything. Like we're not doing like large scale marketing, uh like any kind of that. So we don't need, I don't think that like the average consumer is going to be like confusing us with somebody else. We kind of just have like the customers we work with, and kind of growing, but not going to ever be that big. So but that's just something really annoying about that. It is such a good name, and I swear we didn't steal it, but it's still like it's just a dagger.
that's funny. It's you know that can happen, right? That can
Yeah.
happen. And definitely recommend trying to trademark it.
Yeah, exactly.
um,
Yeah,
just send
true.
the application in, and that's usually it's not even that you would ever use it. It's just more so you can
Yeah,
keep using the name, and or you could
totally.
also trademark it in Italy, and then you could do the business out of Italy, which is totally legal
True.
because you can have trademarks um, are set nationally, and
Mhm.
trademark laws that said you can do business out of any nation. So two clothing companies can have the same name, be based out of
Oh,
two different countries, and actually
mhm.
sell to both countries as long as they're
Right.
selling from the country of origin. Um,
That's very good to know.
yeah. So the
Yeah.
reason I know this is because I used to have a clothing company, and
Oh,
yeah, and there was a
I had no idea about that. That's cool.
yeah, like years ago. And so and I started in Canada, and then like shortly after, like right around the same time, another company based out of the UK started another company named Identical,
Wow.
and had the same uh like target demographic. So it
Oh
was
my
just like,
gosh.
so it was like similar aesthetic, and it was confusing because you would think, okay, this is, and then immediately they were much more different than I was, in the sense that they sent me
Mhm.
these like cease and desist, trademark
Oh, wow,
infringements,
really?
but I own the Canadian trademark. And so the it because that was one of the first things I did is
Mhm.
um I literally, like, to apply for a trademark is so much easier than people realize. I went and found
Yes.
brands that were similar to my brand,
Mhm.
copied what they said in their trademark, and sent the application off, and it was like that
Easy,
was it.
yeah. That's cool.
Um
I should really do that.
and
Yeah.
that's easy. And so then but then I discovered that there was never a concern. even if I didn't own the trademark, because we were in
You're in
different
different countries. Yeah.
countries.
Yeah.
And then they basically were like, "Oh, you seem like a really cool guy. Yeah, we'll just keep building businesses in parallel."
Oh, really?
Yeah.
So they send you a cease and desist, and they're like, "Oh no, you're cool."
No, after we like connected, or like communicated, they were like, "Oh, never mind. Just ignore that."
Oh,
Yeah.
that's weird.
Yeah.
So if this other company was in the States, then it would be fine,
It would be
right?
fine.
This Podigy.
Yeah.
Oh, that's unfortunate. Wow.
Yes. Being the fact that
Well,
you're both in Canada,
yes.
is the tricky part. So, and you can even have the same trademark but different businesses. So one might
Right.
be like you can have like a car company named Podigy,
Hmm.
and you could have a podcast company named Podigy, but you can't have. That's where because obviously it becomes like, would that ever create confusion? But that's a whole nother thing. That's
Totally.
but
Yeah.
businesses have to deal with this every single day, right? Because
Absolutely. Yeah.
you're constantly looking like, okay, what name hasn't been taken, and what's it being used
Yeah.
for, and
Yeah.
um, that's quite the thing. So now back to podcasts.
Yep.
So you like, how did you first get into, like, did you meet somebody? Was somebody like, how did that work?
Well, I was really good at editing audio and mixing voices because I had been like writing my own music and producing my own music and doing all that stuff. And also like at that point on Fiverr, I had done like 400 orders in like a year and a half, and every single one of those orders is like a full song that I had sung for somebody and mixed my vocals and like edited my vocals and everything. So I was getting really quick at like seeing the spots to edit and like how to mix them and everything. And then um I this it feels so funny to say, but I actually like I started a we started a my friend and I started a media slash marketing slash production company before I had any freaking clue what any of that even entailed or what a business was. I had a good sense for business. I've always had a good sense for like business and sales, but I no research to back this business up. So we just like started it, and um, he was a videographer and I was a audio engineer. So we had a decent amount of the services, like a nice service package that we could cover with video and audio and everything. And we did a couple podcasts, and I really liked editing them. And I also knew that because I was listening to so many podcasts and I kind of saw how the industry was starting to pick up, and I saw that like a while ago. This was like 2019. And I was still making most of my money on Fiverr, so I had a nice cushion. It's not like I was jumping into a an unknown abyss when I was starting like a business. Wasn't my only income source. I've always had a few income sources going so that I can like try stuff out and still be safe. And so I so then we edited a couple podcasts, and I realized that the video wasn't really working with the podcasting thing, and I kind of wanted to break off and sort of do my own thing with podcasting and see what that exactly would entail. And he was sort of feeling the same thing. So like he's one of my best friends and all good. So we just broke that off, and I went and just decided I was going to go full time on the podcasting thing. And I started the business. Um did kind of any audio editing that I could do to get my foot in the door. I I got connected with this guy named Matt McDuff. He's a very famous mountain biker, actually. So I think he's like sponsored by Monster and stuff. One of the things that he did was I think he rode I think he has the world record for riding a loop, like the loop jumps or whatever. The biggest loop jump of all time. I think that's his world record. I might be wrong about that, but
Wild.
he's insane. He's so cool, such a good guy. And he had this podcast that was getting like 5,000 or 6,000 downloads an episode. Like he had hundreds of thousands of downloads on his podcast, and he needed his episodes edited. So I was like, yeah, sure, like $50, whatever. I'll edit the audio. So I started editing the audio and liking it even more. And then I just realized like the audio is just it is just one piece of a massive puzzle of what is happening here. So then I started looking around even more and like getting more interested in this. And I realized, okay, there's actually like only a handful of established podcast production companies. So immediately I was like, this is a gold mine. And I really need to get moving on this because like there's something happening here. And I really want to be prepared when it comes. And thank God I did, because this industry was really hard, really, really hard to learn. Like all the pieces of making this company, there was no, there's no pathway. Like there was no tutorial on how to build a business like this. Whereas I think there's a lot of other business. I know there's a lot of other industries in which you can just kind of look at all the top companies and what they're doing and figure out how they got to where they are, and sort of build your own path using that information. But for this, it was like, well, I was editing audio, and then they said, well, can you also like post the podcast for me? I said, okay, yeah, I can figure out how to do that. So then I figured out hosting, and then they were like, well, I also like want something to share when I release the podcast. I was like, okay, well, let's figure out how to make some content. So figured out how to make the content, hired a graphic designer, got a bit busier, couldn't handle all the audio anymore, so hired an audio editor. And then I was kind of looking at marketing, like I really I want help growing this thing. And I was like, okay, well now I got to learn how to grow this thing. So then I went and did that and created a little bit of thing for that. And then people say, well, now I want to use video, and like, oh my gosh. So then video, and then also like huge part of podcasting is the writing for each episode. Well, I don't know how to write sales copy, so I bought a couple sales copy books, and they're sitting right there. Learned about sales copy, and so every single piece that I outsourced, I became an expert in before I outsourced it. I don't want to say I became an expert in sales copy. I didn't, but at least I became like well rounded enough that I knew what I should charge or what I should pay somebody to do, how long it should take in general, so that I don't get so I'm not like spending a ton of money on something that I know nothing about. And then all of a sudden there's like this whole business behind me, and we're like a full service agency of everything podcasting. Um, we have copywriters now, we have audio engineers, multiple audio engineers, graphic designers, video editors, virtual assistants, project manager, and Celine is my fiance. We run the business. So we call ourselves CEO and co-CEO, but it's just a sole proprietorship still. We are going to incorporate very soon though, because we're getting to a bigger level. So I am going to incorporate. Um, and then but yeah, that's like a long-winded way of saying that this business was like a 3 years in the making to get to where we are now. Um, and because I have several income streams, and because my interests do change very frequently, and I really can't stop myself if I'm interested in something. So I've just learned to kind of go with that rather than fight that. And so Podigy, I've had clients since the beginning. Like I've had a handful of clients since the very start who have released like 100 to 120 episodes with Podigy. But I really like I wasn't thinking about growing it for quite a while. Like I was just kind of coasting and doing my music stuff. Um and just in the last 6 months or so is when my fiance and I now have like rebuilt the whole business from the ground up. We hired a business coach, which I would highly recommend. Traded his entire fee for his own podcast, which was um, really reassuring to have somebody who I really respect see such value in our service that he's willing to trade, like multiple tens of thousands of dollars for his program for a complete trade, pretty much for the podcasting service. So that was really good for us. But now we're growing. We've got goals in place. We're still like kind of learning as we go, but I'm really happy that I did all the work to build this business a long time ago, because I can guarantee you, this is not a business that you can uh, just decide that you're going to start and hop into it. You have to have a handful of skills. I have to I have to know what good podcast audio sounds like, and I also have to know how it's done, because you just can't leave a core element of your business 100% in somebody else's hands, which I've really found out, which is why every piece of the business I have some type of expertise in. Some things I have very, very high expertise in, and I can be the final check sometimes. but also I just know like what standard needs to be set at all points of the business. But
I
this
just want to
company
ask you
will,
a question there
yeah,
because
yeah,
I think that's something that every business person struggles with at some point. Even
hmm
I just was listening to a another guy on a different podcast, Entre Leadership, and the question came up was, hey, how do you set or hold standards with team? In this case, it was like content creation being done
hmm
through social media. And so how, like so you said two things. You said, okay, I've experienced having a part of the core of my business in the hands of someone else, and it didn't go well. And then I also need to hold standards with the team, even where it is going well. How are you doing that? Like, what was the story there? And then what's the learning lesson? And how do you hold standards?
I think that with podcasting, what happened at the beginning was because people don't really know what like really good podcast audio sounds like, and also because the business was so niche and undefined, the whole industry. At the beginning, it was very like the quality was still there. It wasn't as good as it could be. And so over the last few years, in kind of all aspects of my life, I've been looking at sort of improving the overall quality of everything that I do and taking everything very seriously and doing a lot of planning and making of systems and things. And so like the audio has always been good, but I'm constantly trying to improve it. And I think that with the people that I've hired for Podigy, there hasn't there hasn't needed to be a lot of this is probably a better answer to this question. There hasn't really needed to be a lot of standard setting, to be completely honest, because I don't know if it's that I have a good sense of a person, um, kind of at the beginning of meeting them, but every single person that I've hired, um, in Podigy has been phenomenal, like beyond phenomenal. The connections that I've made, the people that are involved are fantastic. They do their own standard setting, like they just do good work, and and I pay them very fairly, and I pay them extra whenever I see fit. Like if they do something extra, I would prefer that I just give them an extra hour, and so I've been I've been really realizing that like just adding on like being generous with how I'm paying them and how much time I give them to do their work and everything has it's funny because it's like it seems like it's super generous, but it actually probably makes you more money in the long run, I've found, because these people are just really happy to be working with Podigy. Um, but for the standard setting, there's a lot of standards that need to be set in a business like this because we're delivering a lot of products. Like this new offer that we've designed for Podigy is we've got a niche client now, a nicher client that we're looking for. It's going to be industry leaders and experts in kind of focused in like the coaching sector of the market. So like fitness people, like naturopaths, nutrition experts, business coaches, people who teach and all these things. And one thing that they have in common is that they should be creating a lot of content for social media, and just in general, they should be creating a lot of content. It's gonna be like the main way they get their clients. And one of the best ways to create content now just happens to be getting your face in front of a camera and talking about things that you're passionate about. And it's kind of a no-brainer. It's like why sit down with a notepad and come up with 30 ideas of what to post on Instagram for the next month when you can just record a few conversations with people that you admire and have somebody else do all the content creation for you, and it's better content than you would have ever been able to think up yourself because it's actually real. So it's literally a no-brainer for me, when it comes to like what we're offering. But our actual like the meat and bones of the meat and potatoes of our offer is like a client records 4 podcast episodes, every month, and we give them like 20 video clips, 8 quote posts, like 4 posts to feature each of their guests that come on the show. So they get a month of content for an hour a week, and it's legit. Like it's an hour a week, and they get an entire month's worth of content. So our deliverable is very very high, And so one of the biggest things that we've been doing over the last 3 months is just like, and this kind of comes into like your question is like the biggest thing that we've been doing in the last few months is just like getting the project management side of stuff like sealed up, like who does what, where do they drop this file when they're done, who do they notify, what button do they click on the project management software to trigger the next part of it, like how do we meet deadlines, where's our shared calendar going to be, what subscription platform should we be using to make this easier, like really really like mundane administrative tasks that for some reason I love. I have no idea why, but I've loved what we've been doing over the last 3 months, which has surprised me. Like, I don't know why I love that, but we've been cleaning up all the back end of the business so that we have a lot of everything systemized. That way we can kind of step away from it a bit. And yeah, we've literally just been doing like groundwork, like mundane, like system building. And I've just loved it. Like I've loved every second of it. It's been great. And we're at a point now where this company is like this business is probably going to um it's probably going to be my fiance's and mine. It's probably gonna make us a very good living, and we can travel with it, and we love doing it. So yeah, I keep feel like I keep rambling on these questions, but I just have so many thoughts.
That's a really interesting approach. And the one of the things that came to mind is you said, I have no idea why I love this stuff, but it kind of makes sense because even when you were saying, you didn't feel inclined to want to be on tour, like you don't want to be necessarily on the stage all the time,
Yeah,
and yet you seem to really enjoy setting up systems and some of the stuff more in the background, which
yeah,
is really important to create a high performance company, a high functioning company. Uh,
mhm.
it sounds to me like, maybe you've just got that wiring a little bit, like it's just part of your
Surprised
natural.
me, to be
Yeah.
honest. Yeah.
And that's really cool. Like that's a huge strength of yours, that you have that, and that you're doing really well now.
Well,
um
I'll just say one thing about that, which is just kind of it's just like funny and interesting, and I think I love telling this, and people usually find it kind of cool. When I was really young, like 12, I really liked playing video games. Like probably too much, and it's a whole other topic. But I was always like a kid who really liked kind of building projects and doing kind of things, and like I would go door to door with my guitar and like play songs and stuff, or I would busk on the street. Like I really liked like making money from like the little things I was doing. And actually the wiring, like the first time that I noticed it and my dad noticed it was I was playing Minecraft like every other kid on the planet. Um and instead of playing the game, um I came up with the idea of starting my own server. So there's like servers on Minecraft, and you can make your own server and people can come on it, and um they can donate to it if they want to see it continue anyway. So like, oh my gosh, was that a lot of work? But when I was like 12, I ended up starting this Minecraft server, and had like, employees that weren't getting paid, but they just thought it was fun. Like they were playing a game, and but we were running like this server. We were building things, and I was doing like I was like making posts on all like forums and things like about my server and giving like special offers, and ended up building like a pretty big Minecraft server. And we made multiple thousands just on people donating to the server. And that was when I was like 12, and it seemed so kind of silly at the time, and I didn't think much of it. But I think back to like that I think back to the Minecraft server when I'm running this business, because it's literally the exact same thing. Like there were so many things so many tasks that we had to do, and we had such a long to-do list of what our plans were, and all the things we needed to complete. And that was, I guess that was one of the first times that I noticed that yes, I love music, and it definitely feels like I'm supposed to love music, and like I'm supposed to do music. But then there's also just this complete opposite piece, which is the business side, business marketing, building something that people want. and that, like, that's exactly what I'm doing with my life now. Like, I have the music, and that's a business also. That is a business, like, in every way, shape, and form, but it's very creative. And then there's also Podigy, which is more just a business, like um, not as creative as the music. But yeah, so the wiring, I think with the way that I'm wired is very, like, I don't know a lot of people where it's like that, like music plus the business. So
It's really cool. You some of the things there, you shared that you've got this like natural way that um you are like that I keep thinking of the word play, like it's like the natural way that you play.
yeah,
And I have this theory that if you look at a kid, especially kids of the age of like 4 or 5 or 6, and look at the things that they're naturally drawn to, if you
yeah,
put them later in life, like when like sometimes people go through a journey because they want to do what society maybe values. So they'll become like a lawyer, or they'll become a
yeah,
doctor, because they're trying to do the thing that they think they're supposed to be doing, or the thing that is getting a lot of praise in society.
yeah, of
And
course.
yeah, and so then that becomes their compass for a little while, and then they discover that it's not really fun, and so then they leave that and they go somewhere else, and it's really fun for someone else. It's like there's a lawyer or an engineer or a doctor who is in their sweet spot. They are,
Absolutely.
yes, and but then
Totally.
um, so then they find out what their sweet spot is later in life, and it turns out it's very much the things that they love to do when they were a kid. and
Yeah.
and I think that there's it's really like when you find that, like you're finding the way that you're intrinsically motivated and the stuff that you love to do. And it ties back to that whole principle of um when we are working in the things that we really love, like whatever that is, um then that day is just a fun day. And it doesn't
Mhm.
mean that every day is going to be fun 100% of the time.
No, of course. I know exactly what you mean by that. I was thinking that as you were saying that.
Like you said, like the Minecraft servers, there's probably things in that time that wasn't fun, or there was, but you still did it because overall, like you're working in an area where there's curiosity. How does this work? It's interesting. You're building something. You've got other people that you're coordinating and working with, and it's just, uh, and then all like lo and behold, fast forward, and you're
It's
doing
the
the
same
same thing.
thing. Yeah, and actually, one more thing about that server. I had I had done one before that was, like, I had actually done this a couple of times, and, I still have, like, lifelong friends that I did that with. Like, we started a business together, and, they made a couple $1,000s in the summer from these freaking donations that we were getting. We would give people, like, special features on the server if they donated, so it was like you know, it was a cool way to do it. But like, I still have lifelong friends that I still text, like, every month from that server, hoping to meet them one day. They live in, like, California. But we started one, and we brought someone in very close. Um, we brought them into the back end, the coding. We brought them into all of the permissions, that, like, anything, that you could, everything that you could do, like, they had access to, right? They had access to all the passwords that we had everywhere. And this is when I was like 11, right? And I think this guy was probably like maybe 17 or 18. And one day, and this was my life at this point. Like, this Minecraft server, I was in a band as well, which I was, like, managing and doing as well. So I had a couple things that I really loved doing. But this was like I was spending a ridiculous amount of time on this, just working on this and building things, and coming up with ideas and managing people. And then, uh, this guy, one night when I was gone, he invited, like, a whole squad of people onto this thing. He gave them all permission to do whatever they wanted, and they, like, first of all, they just destroyed everything, like, in the actual game itself, but in the entire back end, like, they just demolished the whole thing. He changed all the passwords. So I experienced, if you can imagine, like, an 11-year-old, it might have been, yeah, 11 or 12, working on something for like 2 to 3 months, and then experiencing overnight all of that just being completely obliterated, like within a second. And I was, first of all, I don't think I've ever been that mad. Like to this day, I don't think I've ever been that angry. No one's ever, I don't think I've let anybody um, have that kind of opportunity to get me that way again. But I went and told my dad afterwards. Obviously, right away, I told my dad this was a big deal. Like this was, and so I went and told him, and he was obviously pissed, but he told me like this is a really good opportunity to learn something. Like this is what people can do if you're not careful. And honestly, like I don't know, I think that probably really helped me because nothing like that has ever happened again. I will hopefully never let anything like that happen again. But yeah, like overnight, months of work for a kid too, right? Like that's different than when you're an adult. You can find ways to cope with that when you're an adult, but when you're a kid, that's hard to cope with. And and yeah, then we started from square one, and then we built it up again, and got no justice for that at all. So pretty rough.
It's interesting, I think anybody, on a small scale can relate to that. If as a kid, like you build something and another kid comes along and smashes your sandcastle,
Yeah, of course.
you know, and it's just like, so mad. But
Yeah.
then, but if you're doing something for months as a kid and somebody comes and smashes it, that is that is just so, you probably feel violated. You feel
It's soul crushing.
soul crushing. You feel
Yeah.
devastated. This is like something that you find so like, why would somebody do that? How could somebody do it? It's
Yeah.
kind of like similar. It reminds me of like house parties, when people have a house party as a kid and then a bunch of
Yeah.
teenagers come and they just trash the place and they're not thinking anything. They're not trying to be mean.
Yeah.
They're just being kids. And maybe one or two of the kids is like really angry because they got something going on at home that's bad and
Mhm.
dysfunctional, and they're just looking for an outlet, but they're not trying to be mean to that person. They're just
Yeah.
looking for that avenue. And so but then there is a real you know there's a real consequence to that, right? Because something gets damaged and it costs money, costs time, it costs emotional, and then but then how do you but it sounds like the conversation with your dad is like, listen, this sucked. you know I was a victim of a
Mhm.
pretty serious crime against a 12-year-old kid who's put a lot of time and energy and passion into something that's legitimate, like,
Mhm.
um and then but then through your dad, it's like, okay, let's switch that to, how can I posture myself as a victor so that
Mhm.
I take ownership of how to ensure that life that this doesn't happen on repeat. And
Exactly.
yeah, I think that's really wise, and it can be really hard to do. But then you also gotta, like, as a kid, especially, as an adult too, actually, is allow that, like, grieving process, because it can take as
Yeah.
long as it takes, because it
Yeah.
really hurts, right?
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
but then you get beyond it, and then you learn, okay, there are people I can really trust with things, and that, uh, but I'm going to make sure there's checks and balances. Like, my wife worked at the bank. Banks are a great example of this. Every
Mhm.
time you're doing accounting, like any accounting, so they'd go to the machines and they'd be taking money, and they have to, and sometimes you have an envelope that was empty, and it would say a certain number, and that number got
Mhm.
deposited in the account, and you have an ethical dilemma in that moment. Do you say it was empty? Do you say that the number was off? Do
Mhm.
and you can easily, if you didn't have checks and balances in banks, fraud the system. Eventually it'd get found at some point, because they have checks and balances all the way up, but they
Mhm.
always have two people every time that have to sign off on both transactions. You know what I mean? So
Right.
they've set it up so that you can have a system where trust is built into it. And I think
Yes.
that's like a really good thing. And it's sort of like, okay, if I what's another example? Like, the Roman Empire was built on this, by the way. Like, they
Mhm.
built checks and balances into every system they had. Like, if you were to be a Roman citizen,
Yeah.
not only would you have your plaque that tells you you're a Roman citizen, that's sealed with wax,
Yep.
there's the name of 7 citizens as well that were witnesses to the event that then can be like have their testimony verified, but your name's
Right.
also on the register of the city where you were born. And so you
Right.
can, there's always like a check and balance. And so as long as there's
That's
checks and
cool.
balances, and also like you said, that character judgment that comes later in time, that can help prevent a lot of those things.
Yep.
But forgiveness, man,
Yeah,
that's the
I feel like
most
as a kid,
important.
you bounce back a bit quicker too as a kid, which at least is good. Like you take things harder at the start, but then like get right back to it.
Yeah,
Um,
totally. Because you have to. And I was thinking about the picture I had in my head was like, it's like lion cubs playing. Like
hmm
they're learning everything, right? They're learning how to hunt. They're learning how to do everything. But every once in a while, they jump on their dad or one of the dads in the you know the pride of lions, and they get
Yep.
bit pretty hard,
Yeah.
right?
Exactly. They
And
get
they're
punished. Yeah.
and they're like, "Ow, that really hurt." And so then they learn, okay. But that's the point of play and like being a kid is like you're learning boundaries, you're learning, um, and you want to make failure as safe as possible. So like,
Oh,
um,
absolutely. Yes.
yeah, so you want to have like number one, this like have a space where you can be like upset about it. Number
Yep.
two, process it, learn tools of like mindset and everything else. But then,
Totally.
yeah, that's a wild story. I
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a lot of people go through it, right? A lot of people walk through it, and then they can almost turtle. They can almost go inside of a shell, and then not
Yes. Of
realize
course.
that
Yep.
that ceiling that they now have in life is a self-imposed one,
Let's go.
and that they can actually choose um, to let that ceiling get bigger, but set healthy habits and healthy checks and balances to ensure that their growth is as unlimited as it can be.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah. It's
Yeah. Yeah.
such a wild, wild, wild story. So if somebody wants to get a hold of you, and let's say they're listening to this and they're thinking, "Man, I want to set up a podcast. This sounds like exactly the next strategy for my business. I'm excited by
Yep.
it."
Yep.
How do they get in touch with you?
Well, probably one of the best ways would just be to go to our Instagram, which is just Podigy Podcasts. Or website is www.podigypodcasts.com. Um, and yeah, I mean we've just like redesigned the whole business, and we have just a killer offer um for a business or for an individual. Obviously, like the person needs to have like a decently established business, because it's not like it's not it's not cheap, but it's hugely valuable. So we are working mostly with like our experts and industry leaders. Usually, those are people who are already decently established. Um, but it's your one stop shop for podcast, YouTube, social media, like LinkedIn, your website, everything. Like it creates your entire content sphere with content that's actually good, because nobody cares about the corporate like stock photo, or like obviously created on Canva posts um anymore. It's all about content with faces and people being excited about what they're talking about, and maybe there's a funny part or part that is interesting to somebody, or like eye opening. And this is like the content that we're creating. Like we're giving people 20 clips a month, 20 podcast clips. Like there's just so much value in there. And then you can also look back at your content on your Instagram or on your social media, and you can be really like, you can be sure that you're really connected to all the content that you've been producing, and you're also really proud of how it looks, because every time that you go and scroll through your posts, you're not seeing something where you're like, oh, like it doesn't really represent us or our company or me. It will represent you, because it's you. Like you're the one talking. You're the one who is like, if you have a guest on, they're answering your question, they're talking to you. So everything that you create, everything that comes out on your social media accounts, everything that, it's all infused with you, your personality. And when the business coach heard that, uh, the first thing that he said is like, this is probably the number one way for somebody to grow a personal brand, because literally, like, every piece of content is infused with who you are, even if it's not you talking. Like if it's just the guest being featured, well, they're talking to you, like you're involved. You can look at every post and remember what you were doing and who you were talking to and what that felt like. And so I think it's a way to create content with a bit of soul. And I think that's something
I like that.
that's lacking. Yeah, and
Create
I feel
content
like
with
I feel that.
soul.
Well, I feel that in myself, right? Like, because I've done the content creation game. Like, I was releasing like 4 posts. I was posting like 4 times a week for a
Yeah.
while on all social media, and it started with so much passion, and it quickly became not. And so that's something that I do feel closely connected with. Like, not so much. I'm not being like, oh, I want to help like change lives and and like make people like inspire nations and stuff. It's like, no, but not really. I just want people to feel like to make content that doesn't take away from like the fire inside them, but like actually adds to that, and they can look through and just be really proud about every single piece of their business. And then also they just focus on running their business, like focusing on what makes them money, focusing on getting clients and running their day to day. It's almost like outsourcing content without the soullessness of outsourcing content,
Well,
because I do feel like, yep,
what I love about it for myself is like I've found this process so much fun. And
cool, yeah, that's great
yeah,
to hear.
like we get to hang out. Like I get to hang out with Justin Moore. Like, like
Yeah,
I get to hang out with you for an hour.
yeah,
And I've gotten to know you on a professional level, but now I feel like super connected to you on a personal level too.
right.
And
And where else can you get that? Like in
yeah, like
business, it's
other
hard to
than
find.
if we were in the same city all the time and we were like grabbing lunches together, sure.
Exactly.
But it's um but then the other thing I love about the podcast in this case is I didn't pick a topic because I thought, oh, this is the topic that I think is going to have necessarily the most direct impact. I picked the
Right.
topic that I'm most interested in, which is,
Yeah.
and I think that's like really important because then every time we're talking, I'm listening to a person's like personal journey of growth
Yeah.
and discovery and figuring out their own passions, but then also like what are some strategies that they're doing to grow their business. And I just like literally like it's the most fun experience. And so now like every time I've got another podcast, I'm like looking forward to it. I'm like, oh,
You
it's
look forward to it. So
yes.
I would say it sounds like, and this is something that I don't want to say advertise, but advocate people to start podcasts for, is sounds like it's a piece of your it's a piece of your business, like the sphere. It's a piece of your business where you get to do something where, how do I say this the best way? It's all about passion. Like it's a piece of your business where you get to be yourself, talk about what you actually like talking about, and that's it. And it's a creative platform for you, which is not so easy to have as a business person. It's not easy to have a creative outlet that relates to your business. It's very
Yes.
like, it could be a blog. You did blogging better than most people do blogging, but it's like it's probably one of the only ways for you to do something that builds your business, but also is just an outlet, like a creative outlet. If that's does that like is that kind of what that feels like for you?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah,
I
that's
think
kind of
so.
what I
It's
yeah.
yeah, and it all lines up with the whole like build a life or a business you never have to retire from. Like it just
Yeah,
um
exactly.
it
Yeah.
all falls into that whole philosophy.
Yeah.
Um Justin, I've really enjoyed this.
Me too.
What's awesome? Like what's something you want to leave the audience with?
I would say if you have a business or you are like an entrepreneur or something, and you're running your day-to-day business, and you have so many tasks and so many things to think about, um but you also love teaching and you love educating and you love what you do and you love talking about what you do, a podcast a multifaceted way to be who you are and show who you are, but also have it save you time and build your business and get you clients. It's like the most authentic way to do your marketing. Really, the only barrier is, if you don't have enough income to support a company doing it, I really wouldn't suggest running a podcast on your own. It's a lot of work. It's a ton of work. We have an internal podcast for Podigy. And we not internal, it's a podcast that the business runs, and we outsource everything to our business. So like I don't do everything myself. That's how much I believe in it. I pay all of the people to do the work, just like I suggest other people do. So yeah, podcasting is also just blowing up. Um, if I wasn't in this business, I would still, and I had the money, I would still have a podcast for my business. 100%. I can say that truthfully. If you want to find us, we're Podigy Podcasts everywhere. But other than that, just I was happy to just talk and chat, and also just not just about business, talked about a lot of stuff. So that was cool.
Yeah. Very
Yeah.
fun. Very fun.
Yeah. Thanks
Well,
for having me.
yeah, it's been good. Thanks, Justin. Thanks for being here.
Let's go.
Totally.
Let's go.